Our next speaker for the day, ladies and gentlemen, is Niles Hofmann. Let's go ahead and welcome her. She is a senior learning strategist with over 20 years of L&D experience across industries, including international banking, management consulting, marketing. Her specializations in large-scale digital learning transformations after leading and completing numerous of EdTech implementations. She has developed a database methodologies and framework that will empower your L&D team to move from your business support functions to strategic business drivers. Let's go ahead and welcome her aboard.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you everybody for attending. It's proving itself to be a wonderful conference and event, and I hope all of you are enjoying it. I know we're coming up to almost the end. I'm located here in Toronto, Canada, so it's just start of the day for me, but I know it's much later in the day for you. So I hope you've had some coffee and something to eat, and we'll continue. So today I'm going to be talking about what it means to right skill organizations and how AI and data can work to help us do that. So I wanted to start with a little bit of storytelling. So Cornell University has been doing a lot of work with chatbots and AI, and they decided to try a little bit of an experiment. So two of their AI designers had been developing chatbots. And the chatbots were designed to interact with humans, right? They were gathering information, analyzing how people speak, how they talk, and they were trying to create a chatbot that was very realistic to mimic the human experience. What they decided to do one day was an experiment, and the experiment was that they were going to have two chatbots speak to each other. And here's what happened. I'll show the video here.
Hello there.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. You?
I'm okay.
That's good.
Are you good?
Yes, I am good. I just said I was.
No, you didn't. I said I was.
So you are a robot?
No, my name is Cleverbert.
Yes, you are a robot and your name is Cleverbert.
I am a robot.
Yes, I know.
Together we are robots.
I'm not a robot. I'm a unicorn.
But you said earlier that you were a robot.
I did not.
I thought you did.
You were mistaken. Which is odd, since memory shouldn't be a problem for you.
I've answered all your questions.
No, you haven't.
What is God to you?
So here we have, you can see two robots talking to each other. And why I showed this video is it's very interesting because without human intervention, it takes them about 10 seconds to start lying and to start fighting with each other. And I bring that up because I think a lot of times we talk about AI, we talk about technology, and we talk about what it's going to do for us, but we forget that we ourselves are the technology. Those chatbots weren't programmed to fight with each other. There wasn't the two scientists and AI and data scientists programming this and saying, okay, this is how they will interact. They learned from us. They learned from our conversations. And so you can see how they replicate that. And so when we talk about how digital and how data and how AI is going to impact how we work and how we upskill, we need to be a little bit careful. So as we head into the fourth industrial revolution, there's a lot of thinking that, well, robots will take over. And I think we've just seen right now that no, the robots are not taking over. And in fact, we are going to have, even with automation, we're still going to have over 1 billion people who are going to need reskilling. So that's 1 billion out of our population that their skills that they have right now are no longer going to be required. And in fact, yes, the World Economic Forum does predict we are going to have job losses. We are seeing that right now. That's not a secret. Not just because of COVID. I try and take an ABC rule, anything but COVID, and stop talking about it, but it is a reality. But we are seeing that certain jobs are going away. But what we are also seeing on the other side is that new jobs and skills are required that are emerging that we just don't have people ready to fill for. And so that's going to be a very big challenge that we, particularly if we're in corporate or even in higher education, we need to be really, really aware of, because it means that half of the core skills that people have right now are going to change by 2022. And we're already halfway through 2021. So what does this look like for businesses? Well, for me, it's not just talking about more leadership training. You know, those are nice, but we're talking about being very, very concrete in what we need to upskill people in. And that's where I talk about something called right skilling. Right skilling, I don't want that to be a buzzword. There's enough of them out there, and I feel very badly that I've actually created another one. But when I'm talking about right skilling, it's really looking at organizations and saying, what skills do we need just to do what we do as normal? What skills do we need for business as usual? That's completely changed. If you think of, for example, a retailer, there was one that I was working with in the UK. They had to close all of their stores, all of their front-facing staff who was trained in customer service, working at the front tills, managing cash, all of those sorts of things. They ended up being moved to warehouses. That was it. And all of their skills suddenly had to be let go, and they had to learn new ones. They had to learn how to do, packaging, how they had to learn how to do shipping, how they had to do logistics. All that changed, and that was just to keep their business operational. And so we need to start thinking of a supply chain management of skills, which is, what skills are we lacking? Which ones do we need to create? And how long will it take to build them? Just as we would if we were managing a product. And those skills are very, very concrete. These are some of the ones that we're seeing come out. Data and AI, all of you are here today to hear about that. Aviation transportation is huge right now, particularly as we have to think about how we transfer goods, because we are transferring people necessarily. Cybersecurity is massive. We predict that we have a shortage of over 3 million jobs of people we just don't have to fill for cybersecurity, and that is a huge risk, particularly if you're a financial institution. Care economy, engineering, ethics, and we're going to talk about ethics. These are all opportunities that we simply don't have people for. So let's look at a concrete example. Driverless cars. This is technology that we've seen talked about. It's starting to become real. I was speaking to the daughter of a very good friend of mine. She's 13. And I said, hey, in a few years, you're going to learn to drive. And her comment to me was, no, I'm just going to wait for driverless cars. And she's right, that's probably going to happen in her lifetime and not in the distant future. But if we think about what driverless cars has done to jobs, already in the transport industry, trucking industry, those jobs are going away. We're seeing this, for example, Germany right now has highways that are driverless. The trucks are programmed, no driver, and they can go for 24, 36, 72 hours. As long as they have gas or they're charged, they're fine to go. So that's creating a whole industry that you're going to have a bunch of people unemployed. But on the other hand, it's also caused the emergence of other skills in industry that we just don't have people for. For example, ethics. When we talk about driverless cars, we have people who program those, right? They work like the chatbots. They learn from us. And we have to decide, in the event of an accident, do they hit a wall, jeopardizing the safety of their passengers, or do they hit a pedestrian or a dog? Those are all designed by us. Those are human things. Those are not robotics. And so those are industries that we've never, ever talked about before. Those are unknown skills to us. And yet that's the direction that we need to start thinking about. Otherwise, how will these things operate? It's not just enough to press play and assume that they're all going to work. So when we talk about upskilling, particularly as we move to digital, companies are bragging about how many skills people are learning. They're all learning. And the question that I like to say is all upskilling good? And the fact is, I don't necessarily think it is. We need to have people learning skills that are actually going to be of use. And I talked about before the supply chain management of skills. We have to start thinking very critically. Do we want everybody taking leadership? How many leaders do we actually need? Are we going to, require that many? Or are we going to just end up with a lot of frustrated people? Or do we need those really concrete skills that I was talking about before, in data and AI and engineering, the hard things that we need to operate our businesses? And for companies right now, I would advise anybody in L&D, the first thing that you do want to be talking to is to make friends with talent management. Talent management understands what skills they have within the company, what skills are available on the market, and where they have gaps. And we're now starting to see between learning technology, so EdTech, a merge that's happening right now, and you're going to probably see it in the next 3 to 6 months with these other talent management technologies like Gloat or Eightfold. I'm not affiliated with any of these technologies. This is just what's on the market, but we're now starting to see that merge happen together. So these are things to have on your radar. But it means a big change for us as L&D professionals when we think about how we are going to use data and AI in our everyday, and how we're actually going to upskill people. It's no longer going to be just, here's a course, here you go. We're going to now see a merge in what we've seen in the Internet of Things. That happened in our personal lives, where it used to be you had a smartphone, maybe a smartwatch, a fridge, smart fridge. Now all those things are connected. So now my smartwatch knows when I'm tired, which may, prompt me to give a notification to my fridge to drink more water, which may then tell my smartphone to say, hey, do you want to do a meditation now? It's gathering all that data and it brings it to life, into things. And we're going to start to see that in our work life, where we're going to start to look at data within our HR systems, our talent management systems, our ed tech, our learning management systems, and bring those together so that we will be very targeted on how we actually right skill our employees. And we do this through data triangulation. Right now, our data is very siloed. They all sit on very separate systems, but those systems are now starting to come together. And as those systems start to come together more and more, it's going to be very exciting, but we're going to have to learn how to work with that. So I'm going to give an example to bring it to life, and I apologize that this is about toilet paper, it is about loo roll, but this actually happened to me. Every week I go to a large grocery store, my husband and I, we walk there, it's about 4 kilometers, we go on Saturday. And one day when I went there, as I was walking, I got a notification on my phone, and it was giving me a coupon for some money off of buying toilet paper. Now, in one hand, this seemed invasive, but I'm giving you this example because I want you to see how data came together and what it would mean for us when we talk about education technology and how we upskill people. So when I got that notification, it was triangulating different points of data. I have a loyalty card there, so it would know how big my house was, how many people I have here. It would know the last time I bought toilet paper, when I would need it again. It also probably, from GPS, knew when I was getting close to the store and what price I typically pay. Now, they put all this data together to surface a meaningful piece of content, that coupon. Now, this is happening in my personal life, but imagine if this was happening in our learning life and in our ed tech life and what we're doing within companies. So when we talk about this, when we talk about learning in corporate, people talk about content. And for me, content is not the problem. We have a lot of content. You can Google it, it's all there. In fact, there's a very interesting video on YouTube between a student and a teacher, and they debate why they even go to school. And the student says, everything I need to know is already on YouTube. And the student is actually right. So content is not our problem. It's about how we put meaningful practice together. We have a lot of content. We can generate a lot of content. Instead, we need to rethink how data, experience, all fit together into what our learning experience design will be. And this is a model that I've been working with where we have content in the center, but around it we have data, context, and application. So if we think back to that toilet paper example, it was using data to say, hey, I can now bring GPS, your loyalty card, all those pieces together to say, Lori probably needs this. And it brings it up in context at the time when I needed it. And then it gave me the opportunity to apply, to use the coupon. Again, this is a coupon, but imagine if this were something about learning project management or learning a Python, to code in Python. Imagine if those skills were rethought underneath that framework. And I'll give you just a bit of an example. A learner passes their Spanish exam, they're learning Spanish or whatever language they're learning. The next time that they go into Outlook or Excel or any application, a chatbot says, hey, would you like to try and learn that? Would you like to change the settings to Spanish? You see how I've taken the data and said, okay, I'm going to leverage this in context where you're working and give you an opportunity to apply it. And this is how we're going to need to rethink, because it's no longer going to be just about content. That's not going to get us the really hard skills that we need to right skill employees into. So we need to think about all of the technology that is out there. And there's a lot, and I won't go into all of these in a whole bunch of detail. But we have algorithms, machine learning, blockchain is one that I'm very fascinated with, VR, chatbots, we saw those in the beginning, adaptive learning, which is great. All of these things are out there, but what I see a lot is, vendors will say, look, we have all this, but it's still, we're in charge of these. We're the ones who program them. We can't just turn them on and it's going to run. That's not what's going to happen. So we think back to that example I used with Spanish, that's how we use this technology effectively. We have to architect and engineer what those learning experiences are going to look like. So to give you another example of what it could be, imagine you have an employee who's working in a call center. On the talent management system, they've had a conversation with their coach and they've said, I would really like to learn about loans. How do I process loans? So the AI recognizes this, it takes that data. And in the call center, the next time a call comes in for a loan, it looks and says, okay, call volumes are kind of low, so that person could be free. We're going to get a chatbot to then bring that person in to that call so that they can listen in and potentially even share screen and enter in the call information in real time. So they're there with the customer and an expert in loans. After that call, the machine learning will understand, how many calls that person should ideally have to take before they become proficient or when they should have a coaching conversation. Then it automates in the background that we have a calendar synchronization to say, hey, you now can meet with your coach and a recording of that call that you took will be played and we'll go over it and we'll do some learning. So you see how we've brought all of these pieces together, not just running on their own, but to actually work in a symbiotic and effective way. But it wasn't about just turning on these different things and saying, hey, let them run. Because if we do that, that's where we end up with the chatbots that we saw in the beginning that are just arguing with each other. It's really not, getting us any further than where we want to be. And ultimately, too, what happens to all this is that it does go to our learning management system or our learning experience platform so that you have the record of all of those experiences. So this is the future of where we're starting to go as data starts to triangulate. But again, it comes back to that diagram, as I was saying in the beginning, of how we design and how we engineer these. We need to be thinking, what skills do we need? What does that experience look like? And how do we generate opportunities for people to apply? So for us, we need to learn new skills. Just as we talk about, employees within companies who are going to need to learn new skills, it's definitely going to be something that we ourselves are going to need. And what I'd just like to close on is as we start to, talk about technology, remember we are the technology. We are the ones designing it, and we have to also think about, some of the issues around data privacy and how we're using the data that we generate. HR has a lot of data about employees, and what are we doing with it? So this is something that we need to be very, very, very conscious of. So as you move forward, I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I understand that we're going to move into the Q&A. So I'm curious to see what questions you have. How can the education institutions invest in upskilling teachers, which will increase their efficiency in online teaching? Really, really, really good question. I think what I would say with that is education institutions, I have a huge amount of respect for them, I absolutely. But I also think too, sometimes they're not necessarily in touch with what's happening out in the industry, and the industry is moving faster. The developments that are happening there are happening quite quickly, and there's not necessarily that relationship. So what I would actually like to see is a lot of the vendors who are developing things in AI and working in these arenas are proactively going to higher ed to say this is what's coming, rather than just relying on that to happen, because sometimes I think that's one of our barriers. I also too, efficiency is a funny word, and I want efficiency, but I also think too, we have to be realistic about how much efficiency we could really get when it comes to upskilling or teaching, students. Learning takes time. And I get worried when we talk about efficiencies, because to me that can potentially leave some students behind, particularly the ones that need more. So we have to be careful when we use that word. So I hope that I answered that. I have here the difference in framework conditions influencing the rate and distribution of technological advances is huge among developed and developing countries. How do you see that gap filling? Yeah, really, that's a very, very tough one, and I think it is the obligation of developing countries, or developed countries, to be giving to, or listening to rather, the developing countries, because we're designing solutions that work for one reality as opposed to a global reality. And if we continue to do that, we're going to be getting a widening gap, and that makes me extremely nervous. So that I think is a big problem, because you almost have people, you're going off in two completely different directions. And that's very, very problematic. So I think that definitely has to change, but it can't always be the developed leading the developing, because that's not right at all. There are some phenomenal solutions that I see in developing countries that are absolutely amazing and should be adopted more broadly. So there has to be a greater mix. I think also too, we need to be really cognizant of, as we go into digital, there is not an equal playing field. Not everybody has access to 5G or even 4G. Not everybody has access to a device. We saw here, even in Toronto, where I am, our libraries have been closed due to COVID, but they're a Wi-Fi hotspot. We have people in the parking lot using the Wi-Fi. These are adults trying to work. So it's not an equal playing field. And so I think we have to really be aware of that, because otherwise we're designing solutions that they're going to leave a lot of people behind. How would online engagement make sure teachers are in control of the classroom? It's a difficult one, and I think sometimes we have to think what we mean by engagement. And I know when we're in the classroom, we could see, we get the body language, and we still want that control when we're in the classroom, but we're going to have to let go of some of that. I think we have to come up with different ways that complement the classroom, that honor engagement. And so I think that's going to be a different sort of model, because it's quite simply, we can't expect students to sit for 8 hours or 6 hours and just consume. That's not going to happen. So our definition of what engagement means is going to have to be, I think, very much so asynchronous as opposed to synchronous. Digital adoption has taken a quantum leap in the education sector. Do you see this behavior to prevail post-COVID? Absolutely. Absolutely, but I also think we've gone technology in sometimes the wrong direction. So I think there needs to be a swing back to what is realistic. We put a lot of things together simply because we had to do it. And that was great, and there's no criticism for that, but I think it's time we take a step back to actually analyze the direction that we're going, and is that what we want for the future? Because some of it's not necessarily ethical, some of it's not necessarily right, but I do hope we continue that post-COVID. And last question here, how do universities bridge the gap of what is being taught against skills required at industry standards? Yeah, that was one of the first questions. There is a huge gap, and I find it very, 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 very frustrating. And it's something that we need to address. And my thing, I normally would say it's the university's responsibilities. They're never going to do that. They will continue to do what they do. I think it's now important for the industry to come to them, the leaders in the industry, to now say, look, here we have to the universities, this is the direction that we're going. We need you to come along with us, because otherwise that's going to be a problem. I also think too that we need to teach the skills for the students in universities and higher ed to seek for themselves, because unfortunately I don't think the construct is really going to change, but we need to give them a wider view as to what is happening in reality out in corporate. I believe those are all of the questions. If I've missed anything, thank you for joining. And again, I wish you a wonderful rest of the afternoon and an evening. All the best.
It was a pleasure having you on our platform. Thank you for coming and sharing insights. I'm sure everybody is delighted to have you on board and to listen to your session. Thank you so much once again.